I wish we'd read a little more about the Ye-Asante War story. And they won that war. That war was won. Then a great tragedy happened. Forgotten in our history, but we better remember it because that tragedy has happened many times before. After that, and we have gone unnoticed. Black people fighting other black people for white people. What stopped Ye-Asante War was the famous West Indian Regiment. When she saw them, she said, our brothers from the West have come to help us at last, and none too soon. An Englishman in charge of one flank of the regiment opened fire on her emissaries. And a Sergeant Gordon said, I didn't come here to fight my own people, and he held that line. Gordon later went back to Jamaica where he was hung on some trumped-up charges of murder. It's a bigger story. I wish, but I spent all my life researching the life of my people, and I've gone nearly every place where they lived and asked questions about this and gone to wakes and weddings and studied life and death. And eldership is something I paid particular attention to, how it operates. And in my first wake in Ghana, I noticed that no one, when there's a deceased, the mourning never starts until the elder announces the death of the deceased, because the deceased is not officially dead until he says so. And after he had made the announcement, and after we had been gathered around to celebrate the life of the deceased, and during the morning part, I fell asleep. Then I woke up and it was singing a spiritual, said in the Lord, but they were singing their language. Then I went to their elder, the Garmentia. No, they took me to him because that's, where did you people get this song? Act like a silly American for the first time. Where did you people get this song? When I finally went to the Garmentia, he said, Mr. Clarke, your people left here about 300 years ago. I said, yes, sir. According to our tradition, we've been singing that song about 500 years. And he said, Mr. Clarke, where did your people get this song? Then I began to listen more about men on riverboats. The identical tone of the spiritual recall, all of it was right there in Africa. Not only the origin, but the very tune, but in their language. But the main thing is that every structure and every family had eldership. This is why a few years ago when I was asked to give a lecture on the historical basis of black teenage pregnancy, and I did not mention black men at all, did not condemn them because they had nothing to do with what I was talking about. And the black women got so angry, they came there all minked down to me to hang black men to the wall. I didn't even mention one of them. There wasn't no teenage pregnancy in Africa. Were no women beaters in Africa. Were no women deserters in Africa. And why? Eldership. When you married a girl, you married into a family. You dishonored your family by mistreating her, and you dishonored her family too. So you got 10 or 20 uncles to deal with on her side, 50 cousins to deal with. You got the same thing on this side. It will frighten you even to think of harming her. Before you get your hands up, you're going to get it down. Because the whole concept of that eldership at the top coming together, both sides of that family, judge and jury, dealing with the situation. Because they kind of put you together in the first place because you couldn't have married without that sanction. I know this don't sound so romantic with you. You like to elope and say that, man, I just love that. But the I love you marriage was a Western invention. You might want it. But I don't know about its workability, because when those old people were putting it together, they had a conference on the boy, and before you see the boy and finally decide that that was the best for you, and then introduce you to him, then you finally get together. You got two support systems. Among the Noah, you get the cattle people. Each branch of the family gives 10 cows. The uncles give 10 cows. So you start off your marriage with 30 cows. You probably got some to begin with. My point is that once foreigners came into Africa, misunderstood Africa's concept of spirituality, and began to extract from African spirituality a formation that they called religion, began to put one religion against the other. They then began to create another religion, say, I am the true faith, so that means all the rest must be false. Once they began to solicit God to help them in their slave trade, they had made God ungodly. They killed African spirituality in order to create religion. Fortunately, the Africans would not let it die. And I'm saying that going back to eldership in our own family, going back to the concept of the village elder, going back to African method of electing, going into African customary court and studying the values of a customary court, maybe we will get back some of the things that we lost. Because I think the European fears a people with a value system more than they fear a people with a fierce army. Once we arrive at a decision that we don't do this because we're not that kind of a people, then once we say that we love ourselves so much, we will not put poison in our veins. So if you got some dope to sell, sell it to a dope, and we're not dopes. We love ourselves well enough to preserve ourselves. We will end the Saturday night massacre of blacks massacring blacks. We love ourselves so much that we will not live in slums. We will read Booker T. Washington well enough to understand what he was saying. If you live in a brick house, you should own a brick yard. Wear leather shoes, learn how to tan leather, learn how to make shoes. My main point is that our salvation might be in going back to old values, going back to good manners. When is the last time you did something to somebody and said, excuse me, please? When is the last time you said, I'm sorry about something? When is the last time you knew that someone was sick down at the end of the block and make some decent soup or something to go down and help out? Once I gave up organized religions and adopted spirituality, I had to have a way of measuring it to myself. And one way is that I will seek the truth and grow strong enough to live by its consequence, even if its consequence happen to be against me. And I will use my life to do something for someone other than myself every day of my life without requesting any return for having done so. I am doing nothing but going back to an African concept. This concept came out of the concept of eldership. The African thought that there was a force in the universe that made the wind, made the oceans. And he knew that that spiritual force was in everything. All living things, trees. And that you really didn't have to go to a church to pray, because the deity and the spiritual force was in everything. If you want to pray, pray to the wind, because God is in the wind. Pray to a river, because God is in the water. Pray to a tree, because God is in the tree. But most important, meditate to yourself, because God is a part of you. When the Europeans came to Africa and started building churches, many Africans laughed when they called it the house of God. The Africans said, God can't fit into that little house. God, who's big as the wind, big as the sky, he gonna fit into that little place? What are these silly people talking about? God's house. God needs a house as big as the world, because he is as big as the world. I think when people make you laugh at your gods and make you accept the fact that they laugh at your gods, they don't have to build prisoners for you.